The book of Exodus is one of the most powerful and meaningful books in the Old Testament of the Catholic Bible. It tells the story of how God delivered the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt and led them toward freedom. For Catholics and Christians around the world, Exodus is not only a historical narrative, but also a spiritual message about God's saving power, faithfulness, and plan of redemption for his people. The word Exodus means departure or going out. It refers to the dramatic escape of the Israelites from Egypt after centuries of oppression. At the beginning of the book, the Israelites are living as slaves under a powerful Pharaoh who fears their growing population. Because of this fear, the Pharaoh forces them into harsh labor and even orders the death of Hebrew baby boys. The situation seems hopeless, but God has not forgotten his people. God chooses Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses himself has a unique story. As a baby, he was saved from death when his mother placed him in a basket on the Nile River. He was found and raised in Pharaoh's household but later fled Egypt after defending a Hebrew slave. Years later, while tending sheep in the desert, Moses encounters God in the famous scene of the burning bush. In this moment, God reveals his name, I am who am, and calls Moses to return to Egypt and free the Israelites. At first, Moses feels unworthy and afraid. He doubts his ability to speak and lead such a great mission. However, God reassures him that he will be with him. This moment reflects an important lesson in Catholic teaching. God often calls ordinary and imperfect people to accomplish extraordinary tasks. With God's help, human weakness can become strength. When Moses returns to Egypt with his brother Aaron, they ask Pharaoh to let the Israelites go and worship God in the desert. Pharaoh refuses, which leads to a series of dramatic events known as the 10 plagues. These plagues include the Nile turning into blood, swarms of frogs and locusts, darkness over the land, and other signs of divine power. Each plague demonstrates that the God of Israel is greater than the gods of Egypt and that injustice cannot stand forever. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, leads to the institution of the Passover. God instructs the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood so that the destroying angel will pass over their homes. This event becomes one of the most important religious celebrations for the Jewish people. For Catholics, the Passover also foreshadows the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, whose blood brings salvation and redemption to humanity. After the final plague, Pharaoh finally allows the Israelites to leave Egypt. However, he soon changes his mind and sends his army to chase them. The Israelites find themselves trapped between Pharaoh's soldiers and the Red Sea, in one of the most dramatic miracles in the Bible. God parts the sea through Moses, allowing the people to walk through on dry ground. When the Egyptian army follows, the waters return and defeat them. This event symbolizes God's complete victory over oppression and his power to save his people. Freedom, however, is only the beginning of the journey. After leaving Egypt, the Israelites travel through the wilderness toward the Promised Land. During this time, they often struggle with fear, hunger, and doubt. Even after witnessing God's miracles, they sometimes complain or lose faith. Yet God continues to guide them with patience and mercy, providing manna from heaven for food and water from rocks to sustain them. One of the most important moments in Exodus is when God gives the 10 commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai. These commandments form the moral foundation of God's covenant with his people. In Catholic teaching, the 10 commandments remain an essential guide for living a faithful and righteous life. They teach love for God, respect for others, and the importance of justice, honesty, and faithfulness. The book of Exodus is ultimately a story of redemption. God rescues his people not because they are perfect, but because he loves them and remembers his covenant. This theme points forward to the greater redemption that Christians believe comes through Jesus Christ. Just as the Israelites were freed from physical slavery, Christ frees humanity from the slavery of sin. For Catholics today, Exodus is a reminder that God is always present in times of suffering and difficulty. It teaches that faith requires trust, even when the path is uncertain. The journey of the Israelites through the desert reflects the spiritual journey of every believer, moving from sin toward freedom, from fear toward faith, and from darkness toward the promise of God's love. In this way, the book of Exodus continues to inspire believers to trust in God's power to lead them to true freedom and lasting redemption. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video.